Hi, I'm Paul Duchesne, and welcome to Mama Paul's video podcast. Today is Saturday, January the 9th, 2021. It's 3 days after the 6th of January. I posted a show yesterday, and there were two little points I wanted to point out. One, I made an error when I said I was talking about the rioting that happened and how Wall Street wasn't exactly happy with the rioting, and that they weren't going to make much money from replacing that which was selling riot gear. Well, that was a completely wrong statement. Wall Street makes a ton of money from wars, from riots, from things like this. They just don't like them in their own backyard. And that was the difference, which I didn't really enunciate well. Wall Street has been in the business of supporting the war machine forever. In fact, I have a half a dozen poems about this, and there's lots of writing about this. And you bomb, you make money selling the instrument that delivers the bomb. You make money with the bomb. You destroy the city, and you make money rebuilding the city, and then you bomb it again. It's a continuous flow of money. You make a lot of money in wars. For a lot of people, make a lot of money during war. That was one point I just wanted to bring up. The second one, I'm going to bring you over to the little. If I got this, I do have his picture still up there. Let me get the picture out of there first. I thought I took it out. I didn't. Whoops. Okay, get it out. Get it out. Out. Gone with you. All right, gone with you. But he's not gone. What I want to point out is that I brought you over to the board yesterday, and I did that little drawing with the tipping point. But above it, right over here, this I didn't explain this. I didn't realize it was on the board. I had put it there, and well, let me get me and it in the picture at the same time. There we go. Camera 3. Thank you. I have a button that went back to the era of Nixon. This was supposed to be a rat, and the tail was coming out of the rat and self-immolating itself. And that's what this was. And I meant to explain it, and I forgot the bloody thing was even there. And anyway, so when Nixon was after Watergate, and as it was becoming clear that Nixon was going to be forced out of office, this button and poster was made in the early 70s. And Nixon's slogan when he ran the second time, which is why the Watergate break-in happened, was 4 more years. 4 more years. And when it became apparent that the 4 more years was not going to be 4 more years, the button came out and it said 4 more years on it. And I had a little post-it tape I would put over it, and I made it 4 more years, became 4 more months, and then 4 more weeks, and then 4 more days. And at the end of the day, the button was literally within hours as we watched him leave. It was a painful process watching Watergate happen and watching Nixon finally leave office and then get replaced by Ford, who then pardons him. Are we in the same situation today? I don't know. But let me start this off by reading a little poem I wrote. It's a while ago, and it seemed a little bit more relevant. It's even worse now than it was. Anyway, it's called The Alt-Right Leader. The alt-right leader reared his ugly orange head, normalizing the Nazis and the KKK, but he's really just a gangster on a white supremacist pedestal waiting to be toppled. America took him seriously and got him where he is today, but then again, Donald Duck leads the Disney parade every day through Fantasyland to Tomorrowland to Todayland. On the other hand, is just a long line waiting to go to Nowhere Land. He'll turn on them for 5% the minute they lose their usefulness. And it sort of appears that way to me. The alt-right leader reared his ugly head, normalizing the Nazis and the KKK. As I may have mentioned in the past, I grew up in New York City, and Donald Trump's father was arrested in Queens, about 4 or 5 blocks from where I grew up, from my house. He was arrested in 1939 in full Ku Klux Klan garb on Queens Boulevard, and I think either 46th or 47th Street, on his way to the Democratic National Convention, where a at least 30-foot high Nazi swastika was on the rear wall of the Democratic National Convention, 1939. Look up the picture, you can see it, in Madison Square Garden. So Fred Trump and his buddies are marching towards, they're going to march out of Queens, because they came from eastern Queens, where the father lived in the Jamaica Estates, is what it's called. And they're marching down Queens Boulevard, and they're going to march across the Queensboro Bridge into Manhattan and go to the Madison Square Garden. You couldn't march with a Ku Klux Klan outfit in New York, period. And the cops came and they arrested the group. They booked them, they printed them. His picture has been in the newspaper. Maybe about 3 or 4 years ago they published the whole thing. It's been published, it's well documented. The father was a heavy racist. He collaborated with the gangsters in Queens, which is who taught him a lot of the bookkeeping methods that he used. And I went to high school probably about 4 or 5 blocks down the hill in what's called Briarwood, which is a section of Jamaica, right down from Jamaica Estates, where Trump's family lived. So I've always had a little bit of a familiarity with Trump. He's been there. He's been a news figure for my entire life. And when my son spent some time in New York back in the 80s, and Trump was at the time at the height of his machismo partying period, Studio 54, where he was hanging out with Jeffrey Epstein. And we have a picture of him with Epstein. We have a picture of Donald with Roy Cohen. And my son learned then to become a feminist. He was so upset at the way Trump was treating women in general, and people in particular, or people in particular, and women in particular, that he literally shifted his whole sort of attitude towards women in general, became much more of a feminist, which he still is to this day. Anyway, that was it, the little poem about Trump, which was a while ago. So here we are, it's Saturday, and impeachment, the House readies articles of impeachment. So the impeachment articles are getting put together, and they're trying to put together a quick version. They're calling it a privileged resolution. A privileged resolution means that it'll go right to the floor. They want to get this right to the floor of the House. Now, if they impeach, there's three ways out for the Donald. He can A, resign, he can B, be 25th Amendmented, and he can plan C, be impeached. It seems like he's saying he's not going to resign. It seems like Mike Pence is saying that he's not going to call the 25th Amendment. And it seems like impeachment is happening. So of the three, right now, this one's in motion. And this one is actually the best for everybody. Let's hope he doesn't resign and is impeached. McConnell said that he wasn't exactly going to fast track this. So today is what, the 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th. So this is going to hit the floor of the House maybe Monday morning. So we have another week to go. McConnell is not going to rush this not going to rush the trial into the Senate. He said he's going to call for the trial about an hour before the inauguration. So in other words, McConnell wants to be sort of out the door, maybe wash his hands of this. Well, he's sort of washing his hands of this in a sense, but he's also letting him stay in power by not acting on it. The impeachment is going to require 2/3 of vote of the Senate. Probably not going to get that. Having said that, they could get a majority vote. If he leaves office, when he leaves office on the 20th, the impeachment can still continue to go forward. He can be impeached even though he's not in office, and this is what we're looking for as the best solution for most of us here. If he's impeached, and it would only take a majority vote of the Senate, not to fully impeach him, but to prevent him from running for office in America ever again. If they bring these articles up and they vote the 50% vote, It would stop him from running for office ever again. It might also prevent him from getting his security detail. I'm not positive about that one yet. I'm not sure whether that takes the 50 or the 2/3 vote. And it could cut off his pension from being president for 4 years. So there's a few implications here which are pretty serious from his point of view. And I would think that if he's facing this, his smartest thing would be to resign. This way he would avoid the impeachment, he'd keep his pension, he'd keep his security guards, and he could probably run for office again, which are serious issues that we've got to deal with over here. The general thinking about what happened the other day, Jill Lepore, I think she sort of sums it up in this little article, which is entitled what should we call the 6th of January? And I'm suspecting that calling it the 6th of January is going to be the best answer here. The words that are coming up are sedition, treason, a failed revolution, or an attempted coup. Now, Trump is calling the people who marched on the Capitol building patriots, whereas Joe Biden is calling them terrorists. And as we know, one man's terrorist is another man's hero. On his way out, as he was fleeing the Senate, Romney said there was an insurrection taking place. Now, the action of rising in arms or open resistance against established authority is an insurrection. The political action of an insurrection is a way of denouncing what its participants meant to be a revolution. So an insurrection is sort of a little step down from a revolution entirely. Then the word insurrection, interestingly, was originally used by the slave owners against the slaves who were rising up against them. They were calling them insurrectionists. Whereas Jefferson himself referred to domestic insurrectionists as the British, who were supporting the king and against the emerging new country known as America. By the 60s, the word insurrection, when black people would have an insurrection, it got to be called a riot. They rewrote it. They rewrote the word. They didn't like the word insurrection. It was a little bit too political. So it wasn't the Watts insurrection or the Harlem insurrection. It was the Watts riot, the Harlem riot. And the riot is a much better racial code word, which generally refers to blacks, whereas whites go out and protest, whereas blacks riot. And this is where you get into the semantical differences, which is pretty much what this whole article is about by Jill Lepore in the New Yorker, the January the 6th, the day after the possibilities, the day after the 6th of January. I like calling it the 6th of January. One possibility is to call it a race riot. She points out it's overwhelmingly white, and it's avowedly white supremacist. Could be a race riot. One journal described it as storming the Capitol, and Jill Lepore is advising against using this word because it's going to glorify things. The QAnon people are awaiting a storm. That's part of their literature. And in Hitler's paramilitary group, they use the term stormtroopers, and they stormed the Reichstag, and the word stormer was used quite a bit by the Nazis. So storming may not be the best way to go. I'm liking the 6th of January just plain out. Was it a coup d'etat or not? Well, it wasn't a coup d'etat because it didn't succeed. Was it a failed coup d'etat? And we're arguing against it being a failed coup d'etat because the military wasn't involved. Parentheses, or were they? When you start to look at the timeline of when the Pentagon offered help and when the Capitol Police rejected the help and when the help finally came, you're wondering whether or not some military, well, it's obvious that some people in power were involved, but whether it was the military or not, we're not sure yet. A more funny one was, in the terms of the coup, Jill brings up a whole thing. Well, maybe instead of calling it a coup, we can call it a coop, as in the chickens going home to their coop and the chickens coming home to roost. That was a little segue she made. The word sedition, she argues, is too weak a word, and treason, although it's fair, she worries that it risks elevating the group once again. So she prefers to call it an attack on the U.S. Capitol or just the plain old 6th of January. I like the 6th of January. It reminds me of my birthday, the June 19th, which is the 19th of June, which is the events that happened in Oklahoma where the black town was attacked by the white supremacists back in the beginning of the century. Another interesting rift here is from the New Yorker, and these were off the internet, not in the print paper yet. They're giving a little story that went back to early November when a senior Republican official, when questioned about Trump's baseless assertions that the election was stolen. It was after it was clear that the election wasn't stolen. His comment was, and this was a senior Republican official, we're just going to leave it at that. What is the downside of humoring him for this little bit of time? And that was the response. Well, it's almost been the response from quite a few Republicans for the whole 4-year period. Why don't we just go along with it? You know, he's going to cause more damage if we don't do this, blah, blah, blah. It's a lot of BS, I'll tell you. It wasn't a little thing then, and it's not a little thing now. And the last little bit of off the internet that I grabbed was Politico. You guys, any of you guys get the Politico? It's a daily report that comes out, and it's got some really interesting world stories in there. And interesting, they open up with a little riff that talks about they were worried about the ennui, the boredom that was promised to descend on politics after January 21st. Well, I haven't particularly thought that it was going to be a boring state at all. I didn't think it was going to be this exciting. I mean, this is it's a bad word maybe, but I didn't think it was going to be boring. I didn't think it was going to go away quietly. And a lot of people like to make this guy out, Trump that is, as if he's this, raving, well, he may be mad, but he's also rather calculating. He appears to not be able to speak English very well. I would put him in the same category as Marilyn Monroe sounding like a dumb blonde. Marilyn Monroe was not a dumb blonde. She was not dumb at all. She was actually quite a well-accomplished actress, and she studied with the major acting coach in New York. Was it Stravinsky? I can't think of his name right now. The major acting coach in New York that Marlon Brando and a lot of these other big actors studied with. She was right in the middle of there. So she wasn't dumb at all. She might have been temperamental in a lot of things, but she wasn't dumb. And I think Trump, in a way, is very much like this. I think he brings himself down and he brings his language down. Not that he's articulate or not that he reads or anything like that, but I think he purposely brings himself down to a lower level. He's a TV personality. He knows how to play the camera, which I don't know half as well as he does, as you can probably tell from the way I stumble along here now and then, or all the time. Anyway, on the political playbook, we go through a few of the world leaders here, and we're talking about somebody from Hungary last year who said, before Black Lives Matter, now nothing matters. It's the United States of Anarchy, was the comment from the Hungarian politician. The German foreign minister said the Capitol's ransacking was the stuff of bad B-grade movies and that we had crossed a dangerous threshold. And the parentheses was, if anybody knows a thing or two about crossing dangerous thresholds, it's the Germans. The other thing that was, in Europe's smoke-filled anterooms, the extent that American authorities turned a blind eye or facilitated the plans is what's concerning a lot of the European diplomats and politicians who are wondering, what was going on here internally. I thought from what I was hearing about how the mayor of Washington, D.C. was doing all this prep beforehand, that this was well in hand. I expected the National Guard to literally be sitting there on the doorstep ready to stop any anarchists from going anywhere. But it wasn't the case at all. In fact, we're just sort of slowly filtering through. How many investigations were there into Benghazi the last time an American facility was attacked under Hillary's tutelage? I mean, my God, you can't count the number of investigations, the number of hearings there were into that. How many hearings will there be here about this? Another major political figure in Europe is concerned over the stability of the American democracy, and they're calling for Europe redoubling their efforts to emancipate themselves from American influence. Emancipate themselves from American influence. The fact that Joe Biden is a multinationalist who is definitely in favor of maintaining all our relationships with Europe, the obvious insiders that were in here helping facilitate this are still there. They're not gone yet. Maybe we have the guy with the horns has been arrested, and the guy with his feet in the desk has been arrested, and a few people have been arrested, but the vast majority haven't. This is only Saturday. They're planning a redo of this whole thing. And the other democracies on the planet are seriously concerned what's going on here. The final rift here had to do with Trump on Twitter. So the other night they permanently canceled his Twitter account with a very long explanation about how his statement about not being at the inauguration was sort of an open window to his followers that, well, if you come in and do anything, don't worry about it. I won't get hurt because I won't be there. So they took him pretty seriously. Finally, after all this time, they're taking him seriously. And Trump routinely boasted on a social media bullhorn that he credited with being the launching of his political trajectory was with Twitter. The launching of he has bragged about this and credited Twitter with helping to launch his popularity to where it is today. On Friday night, he lost it, and then he lost his mind, is the statement they made here. I don't think he lost his mind. I think he got angry. I think he's really angry. I think his mind is perfectly intact. And I think as this goes, he looks like he plans on being the head of this revolutionary group of white supremacists, restore the Confederacy, make America white again. And Alan Dershowitz, this one, I mean, Alan Dershowitz, if you watched him during the impeachment hearings, he's just a piece of work, this guy, I'll tell you. Talk about talking out of two sides of your mouth. This guy talks out of his rear end and his front end at the same time. Dershowitz, in response to, he said he would defend Trump in the impeachment hearing. He said the Capitol riot was constitutionally protected speech. Constitutionally protected speech. Basically, Dershowitz is arguing you can yell fire in a theater. I mean, that's the way I view this here right now. This is a fire in the theater, a moment, no matter how you cut the cake. And Dershowitz is ready to defend him on this. So those were some of the quips here. And, well, I guess that's it. I don't have any funny little story for the day, something new. Well, okay, I'll tell you what. Let's switch gears entirely. Let's get rid of the politics. And Jane Brody, who I read every week, is sort of an apologist for conventional food. I'm not going to talk about this too much, other than the fact that it's all about coconut oil, how it's got an undeserved health halo. And she claims here, it's been known for a long time, that coconut oil raises blood levels of artery-damaging LDL cholesterol. Coconut oil had a bad name way before it had a good name. For years, coconut oil was considered a totally no-no, saturated fat, not good for you, blah, blah, blah. A guy named Fred Rowe, in the 80s, when I was managing a little health food store downtown, Fred Rowe came along, and he had been in the health food field for his entire life. His mother had run a health food store in San Francisco. And he was really interested in the effects of coconut oil. He put out a whole line of oils based on coconut oil, and he used coconut oil as a cooking oil that he mixed with sesame. He took the coconut oil and the sesame oil and mixed them together 50-50. He threw in, I think, a little drop of vitamin E. I make a 50-50 coconut oil sesame oil mixture every month. You got to let the coconut oil melt a little bit I put it under a real low heat on the stove. When it melts down, then I add in the sesame oil, put them in my container, and I leave the container on the stove. It sits there with enough to keep the coconut oil melted. It makes a great cooking oil because both oils you can raise to a very high temperature. And the coconut oil has a really distinctive taste, which gives you a taste of a lot of Thai food. The sesame oil has a distinctive taste, which gives you the taste of a lot of Japanese food. When you mix them together, they neutralize each other, and you get a blander taste, which is much more neutral, and you can raise it to high temperatures. One of the things that came out about coconut oil, which really grabbed my attention, other than Fred Rowe and his rap about the different medium chain triglycerides, medium chain, the LDLs, and which I could have to research and find some of the old literature I have about this. The big rap about coconut oil that really grabbed me about 10 years ago was Lena Berman was talking about the Alzheimer's. And she quoted this woman who was trying to get her brain-dead relative into Alzheimer's test studies, and they wouldn't let him in because he was so brain-dead. He was like, on a scale of 1 to 10, he was like measuring like 1 or 1.5. They wanted you to have a 2 or 3 or 4 level before they put you into these studies. So he was so gone, they didn't even want to put him in. So she started researching this very heavily, and she found out the drugs that they were giving him had the laconic acid that's the main ingredient in the coconut oil. She started feeding, I think it was her father, the coconut oil a couple of tablespoons a day. Within a couple of weeks, he went from like a 1 on the scale up to closer to over 5 on the scale. And by the end of the year, he was back on the computer. Now, whether Lena Berman is full of it or not, I don't know. But ever since then, I sort of looked into this, and I did a little research about the acid, and it sort of confirmed exactly what she said. And I keep a little container in the bathroom, and I take about a tablespoon or a teaspoonful every day, and anything that's left over, I rub in my hair or on your face and skin. It's good for your whole body. So, over the years, Jane Brody has always been an apologist, and I find her introducing some scientific information which generally doesn't have a holistic approach to it. So that's on the lighter note about food. We've been on almost a half hour, so this was day 3 in a row. I'm trying to do, the goal here is to do 5 shows a week, maybe Monday through Friday. I jumped in today on Saturday because of the impeachment thing, but I'm going to try to do a regular basis, a show. I'm going to do news for the first half, and hopefully we'll get into some either these longer stories or some lighter topics for the second half. That's it for today. Peace, patience, and persistence. And democracy is not a passive sport. Thank you for tuning in. Didn't go off. 3 slides to stop, and it didn't work yet.